Hello, everyone. I'm George. I'm not very good with mics, sorry. I work at News UK. If you don't know who News UK are, we're a media corporation made up of some of these titles on screen. I work in our UX&D department, which is user experience and design. We work collaboratively as The Times and The Sun, and I'm a UX designer on The Times. Today I'm talking about user testing labs in particular, and why setting one up in-house is such a good idea if you haven't done so already. User testing is a vital part of all of our design processes. There's many ways to achieve it, but when it boils down to it, the main reason for setting up your own lab is value. First up, the power of being in the same room as your customers and being in front of them is in itself just invaluable. Other ways, as I'm sure we're all aware, can be hugely costly, whether that's using an external agency to do the whole thing itself or just the recruitment side of things, relying on remote UT resources, online subscriptions, or even if you're already running sessions in-house but on a sort of sprint-by-sprint basis or just project-by-project, all of these can be hugely costly, both time and money-wise. So what I really want to get across is that you can set up quite a basic lab for just a fraction of the cost that you might be spending elsewhere, while still maintaining or even improving the quality of the data that you're getting in. But rather than dive into the setup, I want to explore where that value really comes from, and I think it's down to this word, and that's the word lab itself. As I said, you might already be running UT sessions in-house, but these might be on a sprint-by-sprint basis or project-by-project basis, and that might be all that they really are, is just sessions. They're a little bit crazy, a little bit ad hoc, and just happen when they can. But with this word comes something a bit more permanent, a bit more structured, and more reliable in that sense. With a lab comes routine, and with routine comes process. And when you've got a developed process set in stone, it means you're spending less time on sort of recruitment, on in-the-room setup, documentation, all of those sort of things, and you've got more time to spend on what matters. So that's focusing on the scripts, on the prototypes, everything that you're being doing in the room itself. Ultimately, you're ensuring that the quality of the data that you're capturing is the best it can be by ensuring that time that you're spending is on the right things. But also with routine comes recognition. So with something more permanent and more structured and as regular as a lab might be, it's going to get noticed. It gets talked about around the business, there's a buzz around it. People want to be involved and want to know more about what's going on. People sort of come around and talk about it. Ultimately, this leads to more trust in the work that's being done, what's being investigated in the lab itself, and then that leads to increased stakeholder confidence in what you're doing. With that increased confidence, it's then easier to build a business case to improve and grow that lab, spend more money on equipment. Not all companies just have a cash pot that they can send a flash investment into a lab itself, so you can just start from the bottom, start from scratch. So in the last minute or so, just going to look at a really basic setup to show how achievable this really is. First up, it's a panel. It's so important that you build a panel, and at that, a detailed one. So you need to know and document as much as you can about these candidates before you've got them into the room. That's age, gender, device ownership, all the things that you can know about them. Ultimately, make sure you have a reliable pool that you can pick from to ensure that your tests or the tests that you're running are going to be as fair as possible, not just going to the same people at the same time. Next up is equipment. An effective setup can be built from pretty much next to nothing. So if we just look at an example of what one might be, everyone will know a setup, but just those who need inspiration of bringing it in-house, all you need is a moderation room and then remote observation. You can use cameras that are either on device or devices that you might own, as long as you're getting user gestures, device screen record. You can use free services for device analytics until you get that investment. And then in terms of recording what you've got, it can all be done through sort of QuickTime, everything that you've already got on your equipment, and then streaming through the likes of Hangouts, which is free again. And then you've got your remote observation where people can watch and play with all their sticky notes. Lastly, it's just a library. So instead of it just being a session mentality where once it's done, it's gone and it's shown to the core team, it's really important to back up everything that you're doing and have a library and a resource that you can dive into for future briefs and future tests, so you can keep looking back. Ultimately, getting, again, more value out of what you've achieved. And that's it, really. Thanks very much. If you're not already running them, then you should be doing so, and if you are, make it a lab, not just a session. That's it. Oh yeah, question.
So does anyone have a question, George?
Hi, that was great. Question for you about GDPR. Are you looking at deleting all your old research files and all of that to comply?
It's something we're exploring. We actually, our last testing session that we did was our process towards GDPR and our permission center in that sense. But interesting. But in terms of what we keep, it's something that we're exploring. We haven't got a solution for it yet. But after legislation comes into effect, it will definitely define how our library is set up in that sense. Thanks.
Okay.
Brilliant.
That's
Thanks
it.
very
Thank you
much.
George.
Cheers.